Let's pay close attention to this, because it's exactly the kind of immigration story that turns into panic on social media if you don't have the full picture. Over the past couple of weeks, videos and posts all over YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook have been filled with alarming headlines about a so-called new visa ban, sudden travel blocks, and claims that green card holders may no longer be safe to travel in 2026. Some creators say immigration has been frozen. Others claim visas are being cancelled overnight. For many families, especially those already nervous about their status, this flood of half-explained information has created confusion, fear, and a real sense of not knowing what to believe. That's exactly why this video is necessary. When immigration policy shifts, or seems to shift, misinformation spreads fast. Not every headline is false, but very few of them tell the whole story. What matters right now is clarity. In this video on Immigration Bulletin Hub, we're going to separate facts from rumors as clearly as possible. We'll walk through what an expanded travel ban and a broad pause on immigrant visas would actually mean, how such policies generally affect green card holders and visa holders, and what parts of the viral claims are exaggerated, incomplete, or simply wrong. The goal is not to minimize real risks, but to give you enough context so you can make decisions calmly instead of out of fear. If you find this kind of breakdown useful, remember to subscribe to Immigration Bulletin Hub and turn on the notification bell so you get updates straight to your phone whenever we publish. Now, let's talk through the scenario everyone is hearing about. To understand what people are calling a new ban, we need to start with the idea of an expanded travel ban taking effect on a specific date, say January 1st, 2026. In this kind of scenario, the administration would issue a presidential proclamation building on earlier travel restrictions and expanding the list of countries whose nationals face limits on entry and visa issuance. Officially, such measures are usually justified using national security and public safety arguments, gaps in information sharing, concerns about identity documents, or perceived weaknesses in a country's screening systems. Under an expanded ban like the one being talked about online, foreign nationals from certain designated countries who are outside of the United States on the effective date and who do not hold a valid US visa, at that moment can be barred from being issued new visas or from using certain types of visas to enter. A crucial detail that many scary headlines skip is this: when such bans have been implemented in the past, existing visas are not automatically cancelled just because the proclamation takes effect. If a traveler already has a valid visa that was issued before the effective date of the ban, and they still meet all the other entry requirements, they can usually still present that visa at a port of entry. A border officer can always refuse admission for individual reasons: criminal activity, prior violations, fraud. But the ban itself doesn't magically erase every visa stamp overnight. Another key point: restrictions of this type have typically not applied to people who are already inside the United States on that date. Lawful permanent residents, green card holders, are not stripped of their status simply because a travel ban exists. Green card status continues to be valid, and holders generally retain the right to re-enter the US as long as they maintain their residence properly, travel with valid documents, and do not otherwise become inadmissible for reasons like serious crimes, fraud, or long absences. Where bans like this bite hardest is at the consulate stage, especially for nationals of the affected countries who are still abroad. The proclamation can cover both immigrant and non-immigrant visas, or only some categories, depending on the exact wording. In practice, that means people in those countries who are planning to come and live, work, study, or visit may find that suddenly there are extra hurdles, narrower eligibility, and more intense security checks before a visa can be approved. In some cases, certain visa types for those nationals can be suspended altogether, with only narrow waivers available. Now imagine that, almost at the same time, the US State Department issues a separate directive: a broad pause on the issuance of immigrant visas, green card visas processed overseas for citizens of 75 countries. That kind of step would be framed as a temporary measure while the government re-evaluates screening procedures, public charge rules, and long-term policy. In practical terms, consulates around the world would be instructed to continue accepting immigrant visa applications and even interviewing applicants, but not to actually print and issue new immigrant visas for people holding those passports until further notice. This is where many of the viral immigration frozen claims are coming from. They're taking this kind of hypothetical pause and describing it as if all immigration has stopped. The reality is more nuanced. Under such a directive, family-based and employment-based immigrant visa, applicants from those 75 countries who are outside the US would see their cases stalled at the end stage. Files could move forward through document collection and perhaps interviews, but they would hit a wall at issuance until the pause is lifted or narrowed. It's critical to underline that such a pause would apply only to immigrant visas processed through US embassies and consulates abroad. It would not automatically touch non-immigrant visas, tourist B1, B2 visas, student F or M visas, or many work visas like H1B, unless separate rules are written for those categories. In other words, someone from one of those 75 countries might still be able to get a visitor visa or student visa, travel to the US temporarily and return home, while their immigrant visa case remains stuck in issued pending or administrative processing status. There would probably be a lot of overlap between the list of countries in an expanded travel ban and the list of 75 countries facing an immigrant visa pause, but they wouldn't necessarily be exactly the same. Travel bans tend to be based on narrower national security assessments. An immigrant visa pause could be broader, aimed at countries with higher refusal rates, weaker documentation systems, or places where the US wants to slow family-based migration while it recalibrates public charge rules. So what does all of this mean for green card holders and current visa holders? In practical terms, for green card holders already living in the United States, the main message is this: bans and pauses like these usually do not cancel your permanent residency. If your status is valid and you have not done anything that makes you inadmissible, extended trips abroad, certain crimes, fraud, you can normally still travel and come back. You should, however, be more careful than ever about having all of your documentation in order. Your physical green card, re-entry permits if you're staying abroad for long periods, and proof that you've maintained ties to the US through a home, job, taxes, and family. For people who already hold valid visas, whether immigrant or non-immigrant, the general pattern in past policy waves is that you can still use the visa as long as it hasn't expired, and you still qualify under the rules for that category. The ban or pause doesn't erase existing stamps, but border officers at the airport always retain the power to question you, and in rare cases, to refuse entry if they believe you no longer qualify, or you're inadmissible for some other reason. Where things become very hard is for people outside of the United States who haven't yet received their visas. If you are from a country covered by a travel ban, and you don't already have a visa in your passport, the consulate may not be able to issue one at all for certain categories, or only in very limited waiver situations. If you are from one of the 75 countries in an immigrant visa pause, your green card case might sit for months without the final visa being printed, even if you've already passed your interview. For families separated across borders, or for employers waiting to bring in a needed worker, that kind of freeze means more uncertainty, more emotional stress, and often more expense. People may need to redo medical exams or police certificates if documents expire while they wait. Priority date backlogs continue to move, but actual travel doesn't happen until the pause is lifted. Layered on top of these bans and pauses is another issue that doesn't get enough attention: the renewed emphasis on the public charge and ground of inadmissibility. Public charge has been in US law for many decades. It's the idea that someone who is likely to depend primarily on certain government cash benefits can be denied entry or a visa. Different administrations have interpreted and enforced this concept differently. In a stricter environment, consular officers may scrutinize income, job offers, education, and family support more intensely, especially for applicants from lower income countries or from those 75 countries under extra review. Public charge rules don't apply to green card holders returning from a temporary trip, but they do matter a lot for people applying for an immigrant visa from abroad, whether family-based or employment-based. If an officer concludes that your financial picture suggests you might not be self-sufficient, that can be an independent reason to delay or refuse your case, on top of whatever blanket policies are in place for your nationality. Some experts have warned that, taken together, expanded bans, broad immigrant visa pauses, and stricter public charge enforcement could reduce total legal immigration numbers over the next several years, simply because fewer immigrant visas would be issued and more people would be refused at consular posts. Others point out that these measures are often temporary and can be rolled back or modified by court decisions, congressional pressure, or a change in administration. Both things can be true. There may be a real short-term drop in admissions, but the legal framework for immigration doesn't disappear overnight. So, if you're watching this as a green card holder, a visa holder, or someone waiting for a case abroad, what should you actually be doing in this environment? First, don't panic, but don't ignore it either. Viral videos that say everything is banned forever are almost always exaggerating. At the same time, pretending nothing has changed is not wise. Read actual government proclamations and State Department notices when they come out. Watch for updates from reliable legal sources, not just influencers. Second, if you're a permanent resident, treat your status with extra care. Avoid very long trips outside the US without proper planning. File your US tax returns correctly. Keep evidence of your ties to the US, a lease or mortgage, a job, school enrollment for your children, so that if a border officer asks how you've been maintaining residence, you have answers. Third, if you're waiting on an immigrant visa from one of the countries that could be affected, stay in close contact with your attorney, if you have one, and monitor your consulate's website regularly. Make sure you respond quickly to any document requests so that your case is always ready the moment a pause is lifted. Be prepared for the possibility of delays and have a backup plan for your family or career in case things take longer than expected. Fourth, be realistic about cheap workarounds. If immigrant visa processing is paused but non-immigrant visas continue, some families might consider temporary options, like a student visa, work visa, or visitor visa, to bridge the gap. But these must be used honestly and in line with the rules. Using a non-immigrant visa as a disguised way to immigrate can create serious problems later. Always discuss strategy with a qualified immigration attorney before trying to outsmart the system. Fifth, remember that bans and pauses have been challenged in court before, and sometimes successfully. Earlier travel bans were narrowed or partially blocked by litigation. Public charge rules have been rewritten multiple times after lawsuits. That doesn't mean every measure will be overturned, but it does mean today's policy is not always tomorrow's reality. Here on an Immigration Bulletin Hub, our commitment is to keep tracking official announcements, lawsuits, and policy shifts, and to explain in plain language what they mean for green card holders, visa applicants, and families around the world. If you found this explanation helpful, please like the video and share it with anyone you know who is worried about these headlines. Spouses abroad, parents waiting on immigrant visas, friends here on work, or student visas who are afraid to travel. A clear, accurate explanation can replace fear with a plan. Make sure you subscribe to Immigration Bulletin Hub so you don't miss future breakdowns of visitor visas, work visas, student options, employment-based green cards like EB1, EB2, EB3, EB4, and EB5, and family-based immigration pathways. Turn on the notification bell so you're alerted as soon as we post updates. In a fast-changing environment, staying current is one of the best protections you have. If you have specific questions about how these kinds of measures might affect your situation, your country, your category, your timeline, drop them in the comments. I read them, and your questions help shape the videos we produce next. Understanding the details of immigration policy isn't just interesting. It's essential to protecting your plans, your status, and your family's future. Thanks for watching Immigration Bulletin Hub, and I'll see you in the next video.